Donald Trump. He will take the next step and vote for Kamala Harris. In his statement released on Friday, he called Trump a threat to our republic and pointed to his repeated 2020 election lies. Quote, he tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He can never be trusted with power again. Trump responded in a social media post calling Dick Cheney irrelevant. He also did a lot of other things on social media that we'll be talking about this morning. Good morning. Welcome. Monday morning. Welcome to Morning Joe. It's September 9th. Good to have you with us. With us, we have the host of Way Too Early, White House bureau chief at Politico, Jonathan Lemire, the president of the National Action Network and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, Reverend Al Sharpton, NBC News national affairs analyst and a partner and chief political columnist at Puck, John Heilman is with us, and staff writer at The Atlantic, Mark Leibovich joins us as well. Strong words from Liz Cheney, her father, Dick Cheney, and I guess
it really is,
one of the questions might be, will there be other former Republican elected leaders or members of their cabinet that would speak out, like George W. Bush or Condoleezza Rice?
You know, it's interesting that you have, Mika, now, of course, you have a coalition for the Democratic nominee that goes from AOC and Bernie Sanders to Joe Biden, all the way to Liz and Dick Cheney. Those are all people who are supporting Kamala Harris. And on the Democratic, on the Republican side, you just don't have any former presidents, any former people people running for president. Obviously, certainly not Mitt Romney. Certainly, certainly not a variety of people. Even Mike Pence, as vice president, wasn't there. Now, Sarah Palin may be supporting him, but and that's another thing. Go down the list of people that work for Donald Trump and see how many of those people, as Secretary of Defense, as Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, who refuse to endorse him for good reason. Yeah,
well, I think they want a clean slate. They want a Republican Party back someday, and they see their unfortunate truth is that voting for Kamala Harris would then finally give them a chance to eradicate the party of Donald Trump, who is not a Republican, not a conservative, and has not held his word on practically anything. And so they get a chance to rebuild, perhaps.
Well, you see what Dick Cheney said, and you're talking about, so why would Dick Cheney, a lifelong conservative, do it? Well, as he said, Donald Trump tried to steal the election. It's obvious, unless, again, you plug yourself into disinformation. He tried to steal the election.
He's already trying to do it again.
Using lies and violence to keep himself in power after voters rejected him. He can never be trusted. He's a guy that started the January 6th riots. He tried to undermine American democracy. He's the guy who promised this weekend, and we'll get to it in a second, that he was going to arrest his political opponents. And not only his political opponents, but his political opponents' donors. He even got down into, I will arrest the donors. He talked about, of course, mass deportation and promising it was going to be bloody. He talked about terminating the Constitution, talked about being a dictator on day one. I could go down the list. And yet, despite that, even if Kamala Harris wins comfortably, which right now, it's a tie. We've been telling you it's a tie. So Democrats, if they want Kamala Harris to win, are just going to have to work harder than Republicans. But even with that, about half of Americans will be voting for a man who did all the things that Dick Cheney said. Yeah. Donald Trump did all the things that we've listed, all the things that they know. So and Americans, I think all of us we need to sit back and try to figure out, is it really just the disinformation that these people see every day that are leading almost half of Americans to support that? It's a mixture of that and a lot of other things, including, I think, the mainstream media that claims to be objective. There's some sort of instinctive sane washing that, like, I wonder
if he gets asked about any of this during the debate. I would be surprised.
I doubt it.
It should happen.
I doubt it.
It should happen, but it never does, and they never ask.
Yeah, they'll probably start with monetary policy or quantitative
acting
easing
like
or
it's
something like that.
1978.
Yeah.
So, but here's what Donald Trump was doing over the weekend. Again, I wonder if he'll be asked about this. Pushing false claims, threatening anyone who does not support him. In a post on Saturday, the former president warned he would try to imprison anyone who engages in, quote, unscrupulous behavior during this year's race.
And
what does he mean by that?
Of course, people that aren't supporting him.
Right.
Right. Political operatives, lawyers, donors. Yeah.
Yesterday, he continued to amplify false information about the 2020 election by referencing an outlandish claim from the far right that 20% of Pennsylvania's mail-in ballots were fraudulent.
Well, of course, those mail-in ballots haven't even started to be sent in yet. And these are the type of lies Chris Christie said he started telling in early 2020 because he thought he was going to lose. And he said that the more he realized he was going to lose in the spring of 2020, the more he started amplifying those lies. And he's doing it now.
If I had an opportunity to ask him questions or moderate anything, I would start probably with whether the 2020 election was stolen, but then head straight to this, because this is the heart of the matter between these two candidates, not his made-up policies on child care that make no sense. On Friday, Trump spoke to the Fraternal Order of Police and encouraged officers to watch for voter fraud because voters would be afraid of them.
You want to run a country that is based on fair and free voting, you're in serious trouble if you get caught trying to find out what are the real results of an election. It's an amazing thing. Do you ever see that? They go after the people that are looking at the crime, and they do terrible things to them. But the people that committed the voter fraud and everything, they can do whatever they want to do. It's so crazy. And I hope you, as the greatest people, just as great as there is anybody in their country, I hope you watch for voter fraud. So it starts early, you know, it starts in a week. But I hope you can watch, and you're all over the place. Watch for the voter fraud, because we win. Without voter fraud, we win so easily. Hopefully we're going to win anyway, but we want to keep it down. You can keep it down just by watching, because believe it or not, they're afraid of that badge. They're afraid of you people. They're afraid of that more than anything else. They're afraid. So I hope you can watch.
Well, they can watch all they want. You know, Donald Trump's own staff members watched in 2020. And do you know what they said? The person who was in charge of actually watching the election that Donald Trump put in charge, Chris Krebs said it was the cleanest, fairest election on record. Of course, Donald Trump, everything. See, and this is the thing. People go, oh, I don't know what to believe because Donald Trump says this, but then I turn on this cable news channel that's lying for 24 hours a day on the right, and they tell me that what he's saying is the truth. Mm-hmm. Really?
Or they don't talk about it.
You know what the truth is, and you deliberately choose lies. You know where the light is, and you deliberately choose the darkness. You do it deliberately because you know, and I know, 63 federal judges said there was no evidence of any fraudulent behavior, any widespread voter fraud in 2020. The United States Supreme Court, time and again, refused to listen to these because there was nothing there. The one time they did in a Pennsylvania case, the most conservative justices said, you know what, even if we responded to this case, it wouldn't change the outcome of the election. You had Republican officials in Michigan, Republican officials in Pennsylvania, Republican officials in Georgia, Republican officials in Arizona repeatedly say that their elections were fair, and yet the lies continue. Now, am I saying this because I think Donald Trump's ever going to change his tactics? No, he knows he's lying. He admitted last week he was lying. He said he lost by A smidge, or whatever he said. No,
whisker?
I'm saying this for the people that actually continue to spread his lies and know differently. And John Heilemann, you know, the pace that has picked up so much over the past couple of weeks about Donald Trump saying, oh, they're going to steal the election, they're going to steal the it suggests the man doesn't have a whole lot of confidence that he's actually going to win this election.
Right. And I think, you know, the pace, it is eerie, Joe, the way I think if you went back and looked at the timeline in 2020, you would see the same thing. You know, I mean, Trump is obviously, we remark about it all the time, that there's never been a race that he's run where he has not tried to frame a loss as the result of a stolen election, as a result of a fraudulent election, as a result of cheating. He did that in 2016. He did it in 2020. He did it this time. The difference between 2016 and 2020 was that in 2016, it was a relatively late phenomenon when he started to really lean in on that question. In 2020, he started to lay the groundwork a lot earlier, and he started laying it very early again this time around. And the pace right now is picking up in the way that it did in the immediately after Labor Day, heading into the fall of 2020. And of course, we saw how that turned out in the period after the election up to January 20th. And I think that there's a widespread sense of concern on the part of across parties, but on the part of everybody who cares about trying to make sure that the transition of power after this election is peaceful. There's an enormous amount of concern, especially in the wake of January 6th last time around, with that precedent in the books that Trump is driving headlong into that again, if anything, amping it up even more so. And of course, this race has been turning against him of late, and that makes it all the more unnerving.
And let's be very clear that about half of Americans, little less than half Americans, want to support a man who started riots and is doing exactly what John Heilemann said. And they know he's doing it, and they're completely fine with it.
Not only is he sowing doubt in the election, the next step is violence to get people to protect him. See what you see. Read what you read, but actually go to somewhere where you can get real information. And a lot of people who are really busy.
They don't want it. No. They don't want it.
I'm not going to blame the voters.
They plug in, blame them.
I'm not doing it yet.
They plug in intentionally to disinformation.
So I just wonder what they think of this, because I don't know what they would think of one of their sons or brothers or fathers acting this way. Trump also mocked a woman who claims he groped her on an airplane in the 1970s, suggesting that she wasn't attractive enough for him to grope her. Take a listen.
So think of the impracticality of this. I'm famous. I'm in a plane. People are coming into the plane. And I'm looking at a woman, and I grab her, and I start kissing her and making out with her. What are the chances of that happening? What are the chances? And frankly, I know you're going to say it's a terrible thing to say, but it couldn't have happened. It didn't happen. And she would not have been the chosen one. She would not have been the chosen one.
Not a lot of people who'd want to be the chosen one in that situation, being groped by that or anybody. Mark Leibovich, you spoke to Liz Cheney, and she had some choice words for Donald Trump on this.
Yeah, I mean, she usually does. But, I mean, what was interesting was I interviewed her in Austin, Texas on Friday, and I think, you know,